Good morning and welcome to our April meeting of the Prosperity, Livability, and Safety Committee. Today with us we have Councilmember Patrick Harmon, and then Councilwoman Vicki McKeever and Councilmember Tyrone Johnson and Monica Peters here as well. And we have today we're going to have a presentation on the North Main Street improvements. Staff will provide a presentation on improvements to North Main Street between Lexington Avenue and Church. And we have with us Greg Venable, our Transportation Director. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So we're going to go over the Main Street corridor study. I'm going to go through the presentation, kind of provide a brief project history and kind of where we are to date. And then I'm going to turn it over to our consultants here. We have Kimley Horn and Associates, and they will kind of do the presentation and go through the meat of the presentation, discussing the alternatives and cost estimates and things like that. So I'll go ahead and get started. And I will say that after the meeting's over, they do have some roll plots here with them. So if you have questions, we can roll the plots out here and take a look after the meeting if you'd like to do that as well. So.
Thank you.
So I'll give you a brief project history. So if you guys remember, back in 2013, we had the Ignite High Point Master Plan. Out of that plan, we had the area, if you guys remember, that area was originally called Uptown, kind of looking around the area of Lexington Avenue and that section of North Main Street. Back then, the Kimley Horn and Associates also did a study looking at a potential road diet for Main Street and improvements to the same location. That did go through council, and I think at the time there was some pushback from the neighborhoods on either side. You had some issues, obviously with traffic and having to push some traffic to those existing older neighborhoods, and I think there was some pushback from that standpoint. So basically that project at the time was shelved, and it sat there until we opened it up again. Council looked at, we had some redevelopment in the area. We had Brown Truck Brewery come in, Sweet Old Bill's, quite a bit of additional development. So council wanted to look at ways to improve safety in the area. So we contacted Kimley Horn again and started this phase of Main Street. So we want to look at the entirety of Main Street. So that's kind of what we divided into three phases. So this phase one is basically from Lexington Avenue on the north end to Church Avenue on the south. So, and so what are they going to look at? Again, it was looking at potentially reducing vehicle lanes on North Main Street, wider sidewalks, calming traffic, adding street trees, and improving pedestrian crossings as well, and also enhance the sense of place. So along with that, at the time, council wanted to look at some interim improvements, basically in this area around Hillcrest Place and Brown Truck Brewery and Sweet Old Bill's. As you can see from this picture here, we already have the high visibility crosswalk there with the stamped asphalt. Kimley Horn we had just gotten them under contract at the time, so they gave us some interim improvements that we could look at to improve pedestrian safety specifically in that area. So if you look, the picture on the top, that is North Main Street heading northbound, and then the picture on the bottom is North Main Street heading southbound. And some of the things that we already had in place before we even started this study was we had the pedestrian warning signs there. You can see in those pictures the overhead push button activated flashers. We have the underneath, it's kind of hard to see, but underneath the PED sign, there are what we call RRFBs. It's the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And then you see on the pavement there, the warning signs, the yield signs that are pavement markings that we refer to as shark's teeth. We also have at the location, at the crosswalk, some detectable warnings at the curb ramps. And so we had them prepare a list of things that we could maybe do to enhance that crosswalk even more. And so they gave us a list of items, and at the August 9th meeting there, you see we presented this information, and staff recommended to the committee which treatments that we felt were the best from a cost standpoint and constructability. We did evaluate the feasibility of additional alternatives to be evaluated as part of the study that we're talking about today. So some of those things that the council approved at the time were to install additional overhead pedestrian lighting, which we have done that. We did enhance the existing RRFB, so we just had them on one side of the road. As you're traveling either north or south, so we put those on the other side of the road as well so that you can see. So if you're heading southbound, they'll be on both the left side and right side of the road. So we installed those. And then council also wanted to install a concrete median refuge island with detectable warning surfaces. So that was approved. We did a design and talked to NCDOT. That was the design that was done in-house. It's maybe a little bit hard to see there, but you see the median there at the crosswalk. We submitted an encroachment agreement to NCDOT since this is an NCDOT maintained facility. They came back and they would not approve the median in that current design. They had issues or concerns about people making that left turn onto Hillcrest Place and that median kind of encroaching into that area and causing issues with those left turning movements. They did say if we wanted to come back and do a redesign of that median and extend across Hillcrest Place, they would approve it in that configuration. But again, if you do that, you're also cutting off currently, what is there, the Hillcrest Place access. So that's a decision that we'll have to discuss with management and see if we want to move forward with that. But as it stands right now in that configuration, that has not been approved by NCDOT at this point.
Okay, I want to ask a question real quick. Has this been discussed at all? And I know I was in most of those meetings, but not allowing a left turn on Hillcrest Place? Because it's easy, Hillcrest Place is such a small little road. Folks can access that area either south of Hillcrest Place
Right.
or go up to Lexington and go.
We have had general discussions about that, but there's not been any, we've not made any decisions on, that would be more of a, to come to you guys and make a council decision on that.
But the NCDOT may approve it if we say, okay, no left turn.
That was their comments, was that if we extended that, they could, they
Okay.
wouldn't improve the,
Because
improve that
I see a
encroachment.
lot of places where there's somewhere that you can't make a left turn.
Yeah,
It's not really that
for
big a
sure.
deal.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, Patrick, did you have a?
Oh, so you mean extend this concrete refuge past Hillcrest Place? I mean, that's what NCDOT was suggesting.
That was their recommendation, yes, sir.
And the rest-
That's the way, I would say that's their recommendation. That's how they would improve the encroachment for us to do the work if that median was extended. They didn't like this current configuration just because those left turning movements, it just caused issues they felt with that left turn.
Okay, got it.
With that median being in place there, so.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll turn it over now to these two well-dressed gentlemen. We have Kevin Bauman with Kimley Horn and Nathan Butler, and they'll present the rest of the study. And then, like I said, afterwards, if you want to stay after, we can look at those roll plots and answer any questions you may have. So,
Okay, great,
thank you.
Oh, thank you. Great. Good stuff. Thanks, Greg. I told Greg earlier, there's not a uniform at Kimley Horn. It just worked out that way this morning, that we're dressed the same. All right, so as he mentioned, really the focus of our discussion here is between Lexington Avenue and Church, and this is the phase where we did kind of a round of analysis, some concept level designs and cost estimates, and at this point we've developed two alternatives, and we're going to talk through those here this morning. So the first alternative, we're splitting this alternative into two sections since we're going to treat two sections of the corridor slightly differently. So I'll focus on the first section, which is the southern half of the corridor between Parkway and Church. For this section, this alternative would propose to reduce the 4-lane roadway to 2 travel lanes in each direction, and then, of course, using that additional space for things like curb bulb outs, additional street trees, and on-street parking. This alternative would also allow for wider and improved sidewalks across the corridor, and then some enhancements to the pedestrian crossing. So a couple examples, down there's a crosswalk near Richardson Avenue. This alternative proposes to bring that, stripe that with high visibility and kind of bring that in line with the aesthetic and visibility that we have elsewhere on crosswalks on the corridor. And then this would also allow for improvements at the traffic signals to incorporate things like leading pedestrian intervals. For those that aren't familiar, it's the the timing at the light, where we allow for a few seconds where the walk indication comes on while the light for the vehicles is still red, just to give pedestrians the opportunity to get out into the crosswalk before conflicting vehicle traffic would have the green indication. And then this alternative also proposes some limited landscape medians where there's enough width to allow it. So here's a cross-section of what this generally looks like. I will add that, I mean, it would vary a little bit along the corridor. So for example, in this picture, you see that we're showing just the one travel lane in each direction with now allowing for the availability of on-street parking. But of course, there'd be some portions of the corridor where we wouldn't have on-street parking, and instead the curb would bulb out further into the road and essentially make the road narrower in certain sections. And we'll show a different view of that here in a second. But this is the general cross-section layout. Like I said, reducing one travel lane in each direction, wider sidewalks on each side of the road, and just more space for greenery between the travel lanes and the sidewalks. So just to kind of get everybody oriented, looking to the right on the screen is to the north, and where the kind of darker gray sort of filled in portion of the corridor starts, that's at Church. So this is the southern terminus of this alternative, and these are the plots that we have printed out, and we can certainly roll these out for folks that may be interested in seeing these up a little bit more closely. But just to do a little bit of a walkthrough, this is the area where we'd be reducing the travel lanes to one in each direction, and you can see that provides additional opportunities for more on-street parking that you see shown here, and then the curb bulb outs. So the bulb outs are particularly helpful, and you can see them shown at some of the more major intersections where we have the traffic signals, and really allow us to shorten those crossings, shorten the crossing distance at those crossing locations, which of course limits the exposure of pedestrians to traffic and just makes it a more pleasant and safer crossing experience. So I'll continue to pan north through here. So now on the left side of the screen is Ray Avenue. And this continues this section one of one travel lane in each direction, additional on-street parking with curb bulb outs at some of the more major intersections. And then this section would end up around Parkway Avenue. So getting into the second half of alternative one, this is the northern half of the corridor. Along this stretch, we would keep the 4-lane roadway in place, but still provide enough room for additional street trees, widening and improving the sidewalks along the corridor, and then some of those similar pedestrian crossing enhancements, the leading pedestrian intervals, improving the visibility of the crosswalk, especially at Ferris Avenue. That one just has kind of standard stripe crosswalks today, so this proposes to bring those crosswalks there in line with some of the adjacent intersections with high visibility and a more aesthetic crosswalk there. And then kind of along the lines of what Greg was touching on earlier, with this cross-section showing a landscape median along this portion of the corridor, it would allow for a full median refuge for the crossing there at Hillcrest Place. So here's what the cross-section looks like. You can see we've got the 2 travel lanes in each direction, the wider sidewalks on the outside of the curb, and then the landscaped median shown. So obviously the big question is, why 2 lanes on one half of the corridor, why 4 lanes on the other? It really is driven by the traffic volumes that we have out there. So the northern half of the corridor has much more traffic, and I think intuitively that probably makes sense to a lot of folks that drive in the area. There's just a lot of travel up there on the northern half of Main Street, getting to and from Parkway, connecting down to Elm, hospital area, so on and so forth. It's a kind of heavily traveled area. Of course, once you get south of Parkway, the volumes drop to the point that it makes a 2-lane solution much more viable. And we looked at this at the high level and kind of sliced it several different ways. We did some pretty substantial analysis, looking at several different hours throughout the day and different days of the week, just to get a sense of is this the situation where if we tried to go 2 lanes all the way up to Lexington, is it one bad hour where you kind of just grit your teeth and drive through it, or is it more of a, do we run into more substantial operational failures on multiple hours throughout the day, throughout the week, and it's more the latter. So we have some simulations here just showing some pictures of what that's expected to look like. So I'll pull those up now. So here's a simulation of what a road diet or two lane in each direction would look like at Main Street. So you can see, we've got pretty substantial queues and delays and operational issues in pretty much all directions, both along Main Street, and I can pull up another video showing it extending further to the south, but we run into some issues where, and I should have added, this is a typical weekday lunch hour, so kind of noontime, and we looked at the morning and afternoon peak as well as the Saturday. Yeah, please, Greg.
I will just add as well, if you look at those queues, you see those backing up kind of on south on Main Street there, but kind of looking to the north there, to the north of the intersection on Lexington. So that's where you would start your ride at that point. So it does show it a little bit, but if you look at the top there and the queues that extend north as you're heading southbound on Main Street, they're very substantial. And that would create a major issue at that location.
Yeah, the intersection of Lexington Avenue and Main Street becomes the biggest issue with if we were to extend the two lanes that far north. So here's a picture of what alternative one would look like with keeping the 4 lanes to this area. So essentially from a through lane travel standpoint, it'd look similar to today.
How much wider are you proposing the sidewalks to be? And would that end up then narrowing the actual street lanes?
So generally, there will be some sections where there's not really enough right-of-way to make the sidewalks much wider, but where we have room, we're showing sidewalks as wide as 10 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So actually, it doesn't really look like there's going to be much change as far as the street with this option.
For this northern half of the corridor,
And
yes.
that northern half is right now is very, very important. We've got lots of businesses that have invested in that area with a lot of pedestrian traffic.
Yeah.
And I'll go ahead and tell you that crosswalk in front of Brown Truck is totally, I'm grateful that it's there, but it is totally wasteless. I mean, people do not stop. So we have got to be more aggressive in that uptown area and make a difference, because it's just not fair for those business owners and investors. And, hopefully what I would like to see happening is that traffic patterns would, when people start realizing that things are happening on Main Street, now we have 2 great alternatives from going from the north to the south end of town, and that's 74 and 68. And I feel like we have got to be a little bit aggressive and make sure that those folks are starting to utilize those alternate routes and not use our Main Street as a highway. So.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the advantages of being in, this part of town where we're still within the part of the grid network where there are good parallel routes that people can choose.
Right.
Do you think people would, if that part were 2 lanes, do you think people would shift over to like Hamilton and there'd be a lot more traffic through? I mean, that's the way I go anyway, because it's quicker. than going on Main Street.
Yeah, and we thought through that a little bit just to get a sense of, does this work if X amount of people go to an adjacent road? Does this work if nobody goes to an adjacent road? And I mean, we looked at, and in a lot of the previous planning efforts, we did some Bluetooth studies to get a sense of like how much of the traffic on Main Street is just complete through traffic versus local traffic, and it varies a little bit, but on average what we found is it's about 15% of 15% of traffic is just folks that are going all the way through. So we looked at, well, what if those folks just go to adjacent streets, and in this case we essentially still can't make the intersection of Lexington work.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to add to that also, Councilman Harmon, that we did, as he said, we looked at before, and about 15% of that traffic. We thought that would be more, especially with the interstate and the bypass in place. But what we found is that, most of your traffic is heading, that's on Main Street. A lot of it is going to the hospital area, going to Elm Street. So it definitely did not pull as much traffic off of Main Street that we thought it would, so.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so let me do a little bit of a walkthrough of what this northern half of the corridor would look like from a plan perspective. So you can see here, we're showing the two travel lanes in each direction like we have today, and then the landscaped median that would begin around Parkway and then extend to the north, of course, with the median opening up for left turn lanes at the major intersections. So continuing north, you can see this is Ferris Avenue on the left side of the screen, where, of course, we continue to maintain that signal there and the left turn access for folks. And then the median, you can see the median being shown between Ferris and Lexington with an opportunity to provide that safe refuge there and improve that crossing near Hillcrest. Of course, by the time we get up to Lexington, we're showing just tying into the existing intersection the way it is today. So from a cost perspective, we've done some conceptual design and some preliminary cost estimates. So that's what the numbers you see here are based on. We're showing a cost of approximately $13.7 million. A lot of that cost for this alternative comes from, the replacement of the curb along the corridor and the associated drainage impacts. That's a pretty substantial part of this. And then, of course, the length of construction that comes along with that. And Greg, feel free.
So just, and we put that note on there just so you guys are aware. So any kind of improvements that we make to Main Street, NCDOT will probably, I would say they would ask us to take over maintenance of that facility. So that comes with a whole other cost for maintenance. And they would not just want us to take over this section. They would probably have us take over the entire length of Main Street. So basically I-74 in the north, down to basically the city limits in the south. So at that point, the state maintains that road now currently with striping and pavement, even though I know it's in bad condition, but they are responsible for maintenance. That would fall to the city to maintain the entirety of Main Street at that point. So I just want to make you aware of
Do you
that.
have any idea how much that would cost the city?
I do not. I can get you that number though.
Okay, thank you. It'd be good to know, for sure.
Yeah.
So jumping into the second alternative, which we've tried to put together as a lower impact alternative. Alternative two, we'd basically be treating the cross section the same all the way from Lexington to Church. There's not a difference between the north and the south half like we have in alternative one. In this alternative, we are proposing to maintain all the existing roadway lanes essentially the way they are today, but still improve those sidewalks, widening and improving the sidewalks along the entire corridor. Where we have room, we'd have some targeted curb bulb outs to shorten pedestrian crossings. Where we have the room to still maintain the two travel lanes in each direction. And then we'd still have things like the leading pedestrian intervals at the signals, the improved visibility for the crosswalks at the major intersections as well. So alternative two, you can see the travel lanes essentially match what is out there today with the wider sidewalks shown on the outside of the curb. So back to the plan view, we're here at Church again, kind of the southern half of the corridor, and you can see the plans show the sidewalk improvements along the corridor and some of those bulb outs, especially here near Richardson Avenue, and where we have some wider pavement down there where there's an opportunity to bring in a little bit. Continuing north here at Ray, continued sidewalk improvements, Of course, there's some stretches where we're making it wider and some stretches where it's similar to the existing width, just depending on the right-of-way available in those areas. And then the northern half, you can see we're showing improved crosswalks at Ferris Avenue to make those high visibility and make the aesthetic match those up at Lexington. And then the sidewalk improvements would end up at Lexington Avenue. So from a cost perspective, much less than alternative one. This one's about 5.2 million. So most of the work in this case is the sidewalk itself, stuff that can be done outside the curb, shorter construction duration, fewer impacts to traffic during construction, and overall just quicker construction timeline expected for that. So yeah, here's the cost information kind of compiled in one location, and I know in coordinating with Greg at this stage that funding has not been identified for this project.
I'm assuming we'd do some kind of bond for the project. Yeah.
All right, so what questions y'all have, if any, and certainly we have room for rolling out the plots as well if it's helpful to get a little bit more up and close in certain locations or intersections.
Does anybody know the economic impact of, I mean, you narrow down the road to 2 lanes and you get more business development? Does anybody kind of look at that kind of thing? Because otherwise, we're kind of doing it, and I'm not sure of the economic impact. Even if it doesn't encourage sort of business development and walkability, and, I mean, it may, I just don't know.
Yeah, so certainly, you know, the enhanced pedestrian facilities would encourage more pedestrian activity out in front of all the businesses. The additional on-street parking allows for just better access to and from the businesses. And I think just with the wider sidewalk space, you know, more room for the outdoor activities at the businesses, and, you know, seating and things like that. So, I mean, a lot of these implementations where there's a reduction in the travel lanes and making more space on the outside of the road, those are the types of things you see on those corridors.
All right, thank you.
Well, my big concern, and thank y'all have done excellent work, and it's beautiful, but I don't see it affecting the safety. And safety is my #1 goal, because unless the road is safe, people cannot, I mean, I've literally tried to cross, and I mean, it's terrible. People do not stop. So we have got to address the traffic flow, slowing it down and making it safe. And I don't feel like either of these alternatives address that.
Yeah, so a lot of what you see with taking the lanes away is it makes the road feel narrower, right? So with some of these landscape medians, instead of just, if I'm driving in a car in the lane, instead of just like pavement to my left, I've now got a landscape median, and then instead of pavement to my right, I've got, whether it be on-street parking or a curb that's been pulled in, that makes the road feel narrower,
Right.
and generally will lower travel speeds. So a lot of what these treatments are intended to do and allow for is lowering speed, right?
Okay.
Speed is such a heavy factor in safety. You know, there's a lot of data out there showing with pedestrian impacts, it's so heavily driven by the speed that the vehicle is traveling, and you know, the faster cars are going, the more dangerous it can be for people. So a lot of these are focused on speed reduction and how to just calm traffic out on the road.
Now, with the street lanes, because that's why I asked a minute ago, like, how much wider would the sidewalks be? Because I've noticed in Raleigh, in a lot of areas of Raleigh, the street lanes are super narrow. So you have to drive slow because you're afraid you're going to hit the person beside you. So either of these alternatives, does it narrow the actual street lanes?
Yeah, so we can use a project like this as an opportunity to narrow street lanes, right?
Okay.
So we can make a slightly, and we of course would be coordinating with Greg on you know, the appropriate width and kind of the approach you want to take, and the conversations with NCDOT are a factor in that too. Of, you know, certainly they'll have certain views of what lane width should be on a road that they own and maintain versus, you know, the flexibility that y'all would have. So But yeah, the project like this, there's an opportunity to reduce the lane widths and slow traffic as a result. And you can do that, with a wider median, right? Makes the lane feel narrower. You can do that with the treatments on the outside to make the outside lane feel narrower. Or, in some of these cases, or for that southern half of the corridor where we go down to 2 lanes, then that has a natural calming effect of traffic as well.
Okay.
And then, of course.
Do you know how much
oh,
people typically slow down with those kinds of things? I mean, they go from 39 to 33. I mean, do you have any statistics on actually how much slowing down occurs with these kinds of improvements?
We can get some of those numbers and share those with y'all of kind of typical treatments. I think, the curb bulb outs and just narrowing crosswalks is a big component of this. Like just exposure time. As a person walking out of the road, it is just a lot more comfortable to be crossing 40 feet of space than 60 feet of space.
Right.
So the bulb outs, I think, are a big factor in making folks feel more comfortable and just making just crossing the road safer. Yeah, in the median. Yep. Yeah, having that refuge. We talked the location up there at Hillcrest. Having a place where, nobody wants to hang out in a median forever, but having a place that you can seek refuge and stop and say, I have enough width to feel comfortable and not feel like I'm going to get hit by a car on either side of the road.
Now, could there be one, do you mind going back to the slide with the pictures? What about let's see.
I'm sorry, which location?
Lexington?
Lexington. Do you want to see the first alternative or the second?
Let's see the second
Okay.
alternative.
Here you go.
Okay, so on this second alternative, so I don't see anywhere on here any type of concrete median, anywhere along this corridor. Is
That's
that
correct.
Okay, so what if, so I know that we can talk to NCDOT about approving that concrete median at Hillcrest Place if we do the no left turn. What about doing some type of concrete median at the corner of Lexington and Main as well?
Yeah, so you're referring to kind of the approach of Main Street.
So that they
The-
have a rest stop in between, like when they're crossing the road, so that they have a place to stop in the center.
I see. So you're talking about if we could extend the median through up to the intersection of Lexington?
But not necessarily all that, like have one down at Hillcrest and have another one up at Lexington and Main.
Yeah, so if you're crossing Main at Lexington, you could have a refuge. Is that what you're saying in the
Okay, that's what it's called, a
crosswalk?
refuge, okay.
Yeah. So certainly that's something we can look at. The biggest challenge up there is space and how much basically having enough room for 2 travel lanes in each direction, as well as a left turn lane, to serve left turn traffic up there. And then, of course, having enough width to have a median refuge as well.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
That's the biggest constraint, is having enough. Of course, you need the extra width to keep all the turn lanes, the travel lanes, as well as the median refuge. And of course, we have a little bit more space for that to the south, but up there at Lexington, it can get a little tight.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions? No. So all this looks like time and money, and we don't have either. So what can we do in the short term while we're discussing all these other possibilities and making decisions that we can take action now and make a difference now?
So we can definitely get back in touch with NCDOT, discuss extending that median. Now, just be aware that when you do that, if you extend that median in across Hillcrest Place, you're also going to limit your driveway access on the other side of the street. Those driveways there at Brown Truck, I don't think the one at Sweet Old Bills, but they will be impacted as well. So the business owners will have to,
So that
will
when
want to
people
have
are
a say in
traveling-
that.
So like if somebody's traveling south and want to take a left into they wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, if you're coming south on Main Street and you want to go into the Brown Truck parking lot, you'll have to go past and make a left onto Guilford and go around, or either,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you could take a left at Lexington and go down the alley. They've got
Correct.
that back alley.
correct. But that, there, I'm just, want you to be aware there will be impacts to those driveways as well.
Okay, so we would just need to really
But we-
contact all
we
those
can for sure.
business owners and possibly have a meeting with them.
Correct.
And discuss like what our options are.
Yeah.
Now, as far as speed limit, is there any way that we could do designate that a business area, make it 25?
Yeah, we can have discussions on that. That is with Main Street being the type of corridor it is, I think 35, that's also, we'd have to get approval from the state. The state would have to reduce that speed limit. I'm not sure, I have to investigate that a little bit to see what the process would be if we could reduce that to a 25 mile per hour. As we talked about, it's driver behavior, so even if you sign it at 25, I'm not sure you're going to get much of a reduction in speed. We can do some enforcement out there, potentially, but we can look at that as an option as well. So.
Okay.
And I mean, the big thing with speed limits is you want the posted speed to be supported by the design of the road. Like, you want to post at 25, but you want the road, if you want to post at 25, you want the road to feel like a 25 mile per hour road. So that's where we talked about the narrower lanes, the landscape medians. It's hard if it's just, 5 lanes of pavement, it's hard to sign that at 25 because people it doesn't feel like a 25 mile an hour road to people. But improvements like this are a great opportunity to use roadway improvements to supplement and support a posted speed change that you would want to make.
Yeah. And one other question. Okay, so let's say if we're looking at alternative 1, then could we also then segment it, like do in sections, like, okay, first section, Lexington to Parkway, and then kind of approve that in some type of budget?
Yeah, so with both of these alternatives, it's not one or the other, right? So we can take a look at, depending on what council's feel is we can look at the corridor and do multiple options through there. It doesn't have to be either an alternative 1 or an alternative 2. We can kind of look and see what works best and kind of mix and match a little bit.
Okay. And do like a section at a time, like maybe approve.
Potentially, we could phase it.
section in one-
Potentially phase it that way. Correct.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and the intent with these was to develop 2 alternatives that were different enough to get a sense of kind of the range of options. And to your point, like the final preferred option could certainly be a mix and match. If we hear we love the 2 lane here, but we'd rather do maybe just more of the sidewalk treatments over here. There's an opportunity for that.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions?
No.
Okay.
Appreciate y'all's time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I would like to add kind of the next step. So the plan is to actually present this at the full council, I think, in May. And then there will be a citizen information session that same day, probably at the library. We need to schedule that, but that's kind of the plan moving forward. So.
Okay. Well, let's definitely, before that, though, talk to NCDOT. And actually, I think maybe somebody from NCDOT should be at that meeting.
Sure.
So we can kind of really start making decisions and moving ahead, because I feel like we keep having this discussion and we don't move anywhere. And I'm sorry, but it's very frustrating.
Yep,
So,
I understand. Yes, ma'am, we can do
very
that.
frustrating. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we'll be around afterwards if there's any follow-up questions or want to look at the roll plots. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. So if there's no other comments, I do have an announcement with Brown Truck. They're having their 8th anniversary this Saturday. It is Social Saturday this weekend, so make sure you celebrate in our downtown and ride the trolley and support all the businesses in that area. So anyway, if there's no more comment, this meeting is adjourned.